Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andy, and welcome to this week's Team Kentucky Update. Today, we start where we always start, with our Kentucky economy, and we've got some news today on how we're going to put in the work to make it stronger. Since the beginning of this administration, we've now announced over 1,200 new location and expansion projects, totaling more than $43 billion in announced investments, a record for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. The best news is these announcements are creating over 63,000 new full-time jobs, also a record. A major part of this success has been foreign investment, especially from European countries. Kentucky has over 530 internationally owned facilities that employ over 115,000 Kentuckians. That includes 238 European-owned companies employing over 40,000 Kentuckians. In fact, our state ranks fifth nationally in foreign direct investment, or FDI, employment. To keep these relationships strong and to secure even more investment, Team Kentucky will be going on a foreign trade mission next week to London, Paris, and Dublin. During this trip, I will personally meet with 45 companies. 16 of those companies are existing Kentucky businesses that employ about 4,000 of our people. Several of the companies I'm meeting with currently have active projects. Combined, they have the potential to bring in 2,900 additional jobs and $3.5 billion in investment. During this trip, we're also meeting with trade officials in the UK and France. This is important right now as the president and his ever-changing tariff policies are making trade more complicated and more challenging. These are Kentucky's second and third largest export markets, with over $9.7 billion in goods exported to these countries last year alone. So it's really important to keep these conversations going, especially with the challenge of tariffs, to make sure our Kentucky goods are bought abroad because they support jobs right here at home. Securing investments and new jobs takes a lot of work, and our team is committed to showing companies across the world that Kentucky is the best place to do business. And I'm really proud of what we've accomplished together. This is a really important trip. I'm excited and hopeful that we will return with a lot of good news. Now for an update on our Pre-K for All initiative. My goal as governor is to build a better Kentucky for every person who lives in our Commonwealth. I'm proud of what we've accomplished so far. Together, we've created more new jobs and more new investment than any other administration in history. My goal is to keep that momentum going, especially when it comes to creating opportunities for our kids to reach their dreams right here in their home state. To do that, we're starting with the single most effective way to set our children and our state up for success. And that's by advocating for Pre-K for All for every Kentucky 4-year-old. Every child deserves a good start. As it says in Proverbs, start children off the way they should, and even when they're old, they will not turn from it. In addition to our kids, Pre-K for All would help our parents, caregivers, businesses, our workforce, and our economy. Pre-K for All will increase kindergarten readiness. It'll boost earnings by nearly $9,000 per year for our families for at least 6 years. It'll also grow Kentucky's workforce by up to 70,000 people and help our businesses, families, and economy thrive. Put simply, it is a win for everyone. So in June, I issued an executive order launching the Pre-K for All initiative and created the advisory committee. In the last 4 months, the Pre-K for All advisory committee has held town halls around the state. We've heard from Kentuckians about the challenges they face when it comes to childcare. We brought these town halls to our people because we wanted to make sure that Pre-K for All was the people's plan, that it meets the needs of Kentuckians. What we found is that nearly 90% of town hall participants support more funding for preschool and for expanding preschool access. We've seen over 60,000 Kentuckians write to their state legislators asking them to increase preschool access. In addition to town halls, we've also held 40 outreach events across the Commonwealth. We've heard from thousands of Kentuckians, including parents, educators, business owners, child care providers, legislators, and local officials, both Republican and Democrat. Because Pre-K for All should be a nonpartisan issue. And I'm happy to share the majority of our county judge executives agree. As of today, 63 of those county judge executives, the majority of whom are Republican, sent a letter to all members of the Kentucky General Assembly telling them to support expanding pre-K. And since we've started preparing for today, 2 more have joined. Some felt so strongly, they sent their own letter. In addition to our county judges, 31 mayors representing cities in every region of Kentucky also wrote a letter to the General Assembly. From west to east, we heard from leaders in Paducah, Princeton, Mayfield, Murray, and Owensboro. From Newport, Bellevue, and Carrollton, Moorhead, Sandy Hook, Pikeville, Jackson, and Hazard, and Hodgenville, Winchester, Versailles, and E-Town. Leaders across Kentucky are stepping forward to say we need to expand preschool and we need to do it now. And that call for action is shared by so many, because right now more than half of Kentucky's children arrive in kindergarten not ready. The Kentucky School Board Association conducted a survey finding well over 90% of Kentucky school board members supported expanding preschool in this coming session. And today, I'm also happy to share that the Kentucky Association of School Superintendents have endorsed the Pre-K for All initiative. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. A lot of these folks have traveled here today to say Kentucky needs Pre-K for All. Today, we have Alvin Garrison, Superintendent of Covington Independent Schools, Billy Parker, Superintendent for Scott County Schools, Elizabethtown Mayor Jeff Gregory, Anderson County Judge Executive Gritton. I'd invite all of you all up here so you can share in your words why you support Pre-K for All.
Good afternoon, Governor and Team Kentucky. I would like to emphasize the significance of the initiative Pre-K for All. As our Northern Kentucky Chamber President, Britt Cooper, aptly stated, Pre-K for All is good for business. As Superintendent of Covington Independent, I have the unique honor or unique opportunity to observe the advantages of our neighbors in Cincinnati, which they enjoy, as they enjoy early or childhood education. Since 2016, Cincinnati has provided pre-K for every 4-year-old citywide. This creates a competitive landscape for Covington, where our businesses and schools must strive to match these offerings. Investing in pre-K for all is essential for continued growth in Northern Kentucky. With new investments emerging every day, our children and families should have equal access to educational opportunities, just as if they were to move across the river. Covington Independent proudly supports Pre-K for All and the expansion of educational access in our Commonwealth. This initiative not only is beneficial for our families, but also vital for enhancing the competitiveness of our state. We appreciate the governor and his team for prioritizing public education and committing to making Pre-K for All a reality in Kentucky.
Good afternoon. I'm Billy Parker, Superintendent of Scott County Schools, and I proudly serve one of the fastest growing communities in Kentucky with a student population of just over 10,000 students in grades pre-K through 12. We're lucky to have employer investment in our community with strong business partners like Toyota. We do not take these important relationships for granted. It is our goal to serve the needs of our community now and in the future by continuing to provide new and meaningful opportunities for our students. Each day we work to make Scott County the greatest place in the world to live and learn for everyone. And that begins with our youngest learners. A child's brain development is 90% completed by age 5. When we miss out on giving children exposure to phonics, math skills, and social skills during this critical window, we miss a major opportunity in a child's development. Teachers in the classroom know the challenges of helping students who start behind and need additional resources and interventions to help them perform on grade level. Kentucky schools can't afford to play catch up. In Kentucky, we set bold and ambitious goals to make life better for our state and its people. I recognize there are challenges with funding, facilities, and staffing that are being discussed and worked through. But this whole situation reminds me of the discussions that we shared just a few years ago around our commitment to make our schools safer and ensure a school resource officer on every school campus. Through a phased-in approach, the impact we made towards achieving that goal has been beyond significant. Pre-K for all would be no different. It would be another impactful solution to support Kentucky students. And I have absolutely no doubt that, once again, as Team Kentucky, we can work together to provide this meaningful opportunity to our youngest learners.
Thank you, Governor, Lieutenant Governor, for this opportunity. I will tell you, I am accompanied today by my wife, Melissa, who has been in elementary education for 24 years, and she is a kindergarten teacher at Elizabethtown Independent Schools. And when I saw the letter go out asking for our signature on the petition for pre-K for all for KLC and for the mayors, I immediately called her, and before I could even get it out, she said, sign it. That's how important it is to what she does and what they do in our school districts every day. I've also spoken with our principal and our superintendent there in Elizabethtown. They're all proponents. But I'm here to talk to you a little bit about what pre-K for all can also do for Kentucky cities. The city of Elizabethtown is pleased to support pre-K for all. And I want to emphasize that making sure all of our 4-year-olds have access to preschool is paramount. But as a representative of the fastest growing city in the state of Kentucky, and that's because of some great things that we'll talk about at a different press conference, the opportunities that have arisen in Elizabethtown and across the Commonwealth, as far as industrial, as far as commercial and residential, people are flocking to our community. And so that puts a strain on our workforce at times. So in Hardin County, on average, families spend over 10% of their annual income on childcare. And that's thousands of dollars that we can return to the pockets of our working families when we provide them access to pre-K. So studies have shown that on average, parents will save about $7,000 on the cost of pre-K when we guarantee pre-K for all. Not only will families save on that out-of-pocket cost, but they'll also be able to participate in the workforce, especially our working mothers, which I think is very important. Elizabethtown is proud to support a policy that is pro-family, pro-business, and pro-education, and that will benefit all Kentuckians. So I've also spoken with Hardin County Schools and our superintendent, Teresa Morgan. They're incredibly supportive of this initiative because they know, as we know, our families deserve this support. And I'm happy to be here in support of pre-K for all for not only Elizabethtown, but all Kentucky cities, and grateful that the governor and our legislature will be pushing this common sense, bipartisan policy forward. And Governor, we have a mutual friend and former Senator Joe Prather who once told me one time, everything that's worthwhile happens in the middle. And this is a bipartisan bill that can make everybody successful and a win-win-win for everybody in Kentucky. And I'm proud to stand up here and represent our cities in Elizabethtown for that. Thank you.
Governor, Lieutenant Governor, thank you for allowing me to be here. My name's Aubrey Gritton. I'm the county judge in Anderson County. And in speaking with our superintendent, Sheila Mitchell, she's on board with this as well. What pre-K for all is doing is transformational to the educational system. I could stand here and read this, and I can read it because I have an education. Where does that education start? It starts in kindergarten. Or does it? Or can it start in pre-K? 46% of Kentucky's children are not kindergarten ready when they get there. That's more than half. This is a transformational program that not only will help our children, but help their parents get back into the workforce. We're hearing of groundbreaking announcements almost daily here in the state of Kentucky with job opportunities, companies coming. We're going to need a greater workforce. To get a greater workforce, we need educated people. To get educated people, we need pre-K for all. That's why I'm standing here in full support of this. 79 of 120 Kentucky counties are what's deemed child care deserts, which means we don't have the affordability that some of the more populous counties have. We all deserve the same. What do we call that? Opportunity. We are presented with an opportunity. The governor and lieutenant governor have been presented this opportunity. They're presenting it now to us. We need to present it to the people. We need to get behind this. We need to do everything we can, east to west, north to south, to support pre-K for all and make our Commonwealth even greater than it is right now. So we thank you for that, sir.
Thank you. So to put a bow on this, we are all here today to stand together and say Kentucky needs pre-K for all. It will expand access to childcare and learning. It'll give parents and caregivers options and help them to save money. It'll create jobs and boost our workforce. Pre-K for all is not political whatsoever. It is simply the right thing to do for Kentucky. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you to our Lieutenant Governor, our superintendents, our judge, our mayor, but most importantly, our kindergarten teacher that is also here today. Thank you for what you do. Next, we have some updates on our high ground sites in Eastern Kentucky. Following the deadly 2022 floods, we took on the most ambitious rebuild in the nation. The goal, to move flood survivors out of the floodplains with 8 new high ground communities across 5 counties. Our fellow Kentuckians deserve to be safe, to feel safe, and we're building their new Kentucky homes to deliver that security. We're also creating additional housing options across the region with apartments and smaller scale neighborhoods. A few months ago, we broke ground on a new high ground community in Prestonsburg. Team Kentucky supported this with $10 million to purchase 2 vacant lots in Prestonsburg and to build 33 homes, new homes, and to rehabilitate 1 existing one. And last week, we received some amazing footage of the progress at New Hope. These are both of the lots right down the street from each other. You can see the new homes are already going up right next to the Big Sandy Area Development District. It is exciting progress for the people of Floyd County. In Knott County, we're building 175 housing units at the Chestnut Ridge site. And this week, we're awarding $14 million to develop 74 rental units at Chestnut Ridge. These awards are $2 million to the Housing Development Alliance to build 10 rental units, $3.2 million to Frontier Housing to build 16 rental units, $4 million to Homes Inc. to build 20 units, $5.6 million to Family Scholar House to build 28 rental units. These units will be a mix of single and multi-bedroom. Earlier this year, we announced a total of $6 million to 3 housing developers. Each developer is building 10 homes at Chestnut Ridge. And we're going to have even more announcements in the near future for the property. The high ground neighborhood is going to be a mix of rental units and single family houses for home ownerships, because we know to truly solve this housing crisis is going to take a mix of options for the people of Eastern Kentucky. That's why our high ground initiative has evolved to meet the needs of every community. For a quick breakdown of the 8 communities, in Knott County, there's Chestnut Ridge and Olive Branch. Together, they're building about 300 homes. In Letcher County, we're building homes at the Grandview site, which will have about 60 homes when finished. That's right along the Virginia-Kentucky border. We finished the cottages at Thompson Branch. There are 10 brand new homes right outside of Whitesburg. In Floyd County, we're building 34 homes at New Hope Estates, and we've already built 14 in the Wayland community as well. In Perry County, we're building almost 100 homes at the Skyview site in Hazard. We've already framed the first of these homes. In fact, we saw one of the first residents get their keys. In Breathitt County, we're building 17 homes at a property in Jackson, and just this week, we learned the city of Jackson has named the property. It'll be called Top Cat Way. We visited this future neighborhood earlier this year using $6 million in disaster recovery funds to help build these homes. All these neighborhoods are out of the floodplain. None of them are going to flood. People are going to be safe and to feel safe. They're going to get that new Kentucky home that can be a forever home to make good memories with their families. We'll have more updates soon. These projects are moving fast, and it's really exciting for these families. All right, today we also have Sergeant Matt Sudduth here with us from the Kentucky State Police. The sergeant's going to speak on KSP's active investigation into threats being made against Kentucky Parole Board members, fueled by inaccurate information. And as he makes his way up here, I'll also share the FBI is now involved in the investigations. No one should ever have to face threats, especially someone doing a very hard job. At a time of increased political violence around this country, these types of threats we take incredibly seriously. We are grateful to KSP and our law enforcement for their hard work. Sergeant?
Thank you, Governor. I believe we've already stated at this point, but beginning of this past weekend, the Kentucky State Police was notified of some threats that have been made towards our Kentucky Parole Board. Threats in today's environment sometimes become a reality, so we take every threat, anything that we need to look into very seriously, which is the case in this situation. Several of the board members received threats of violence, some of those even death threats. We began an investigation to see if we could determine the source of these threats and to hold those responsible for those threats accountable. The investigation is remaining ongoing at this time, and we have partnered with some federal partners to help assist us in that investigation. We are making progress in that investigation. The Kentucky State Police, the mission of our agency is to prevent, reduce, and deter crime and the fear of crime. And in this situation, we have both crime and the fear of crime, because making a threat is a criminal offense, punishable by jail time, but also if somebody were to actually act out that threat, that's where we're talking about the fear of crime. People are in fear for their life or in fear of being injured or harmed by somebody. So that's a situation we take very seriously. We don't want anybody in the state of Kentucky to be afraid to be able to take their kids to school or to go to work because of somebody has made a threat against their life. So we're going to continue to urge anybody who's feels compelled to make a threat against somebody else. Let's just stop. That is a criminal offense. We're not going to tolerate it. It is not okay. So do not make a threat of violence toward anybody. We understand people have First Amendment rights, and we're going to support those rights. But making threats of violence is not a protected form of speech or expression. If anybody has any information regarding these threats, we'd encourage them to visit the Kentucky State Police website. There's a way of submitting a tip there. And like I said, we're going to continue this investigation. And if we can, when we get to a point where we're ready to hold those accountable, that'll be the next steps in the investigation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sergeant, and thank you for the work of KSP and to all of our troopers. Remember, sharing accurate information is so important. We're urging everyone to only share the facts, the real facts around this case, which is that the parole board never made a decision to release Ronald Exantis. Instead, every time it came in front of them, they voted against him and to keep him in prison. A state statute passed by a previous General Assembly required his release at the date it was in line with the crimes he was convicted of. So if you are calling and leaving one of these racist, violent messages for our parole board members, they were trying to do what you wanted them to do. They made the decision the way that you claim that they should have. And the only, there's just no acceptable reason to ever threaten another human being with violence. And these people do a hard job on the parole board. They shouldn't be subject to these types of threats being made at them. All right. I've got some exciting news that's going on for our Kentucky State Parks. Team Kentucky is launching the first ever official mobile app for Kentucky State Parks. With this new app, exploring our 44 parks is going to be easier and safer. For the first time, visitors will have access to detailed, updated offline trail maps, outdoor activities, and hiking opportunities right at their fingertips. Kentucky State Parks have a lot for folks to enjoy. In addition to hiking, many sites have golfing, lakes, birding, and more. If you haven't been to a park in a while, it's time to plan a visit. And while you're there, you can take part in the new Kentucky Passport Challenge. During your visit, check in on any state park on the app. Each check-in earns a digital badge tied to that park. The goal is to collect all 44. To download the app, learn more on the screen. For more details, visit parks.ky.gov. And now for this week's Team Kentucky All-Star, we're highlighting the Georgetown Scott County Parks and Recreation. This year, they're one of just 11 departments across the country to receive accreditation through the National Recreation and Park Association. To receive that certification, the department has to meet national standards. Those standards ensure that the departments are responsive to the needs of the communities, programming is affordable and accessible, and programs offered are inclusive and valuable. And this group, it does so much. It teaches kids cooking skills. It offers swimming lessons. It brings food and live music to community events like their annual fall harvest and so much more. There are just over 200 parks departments across the country that have ever received this honor. That means that nationwide, the Georgetown Scott County Parks and Recreation Department is one of 2% of departments with this accreditation. So congrats to Georgetown and to Scott County. Take your kids on out to Pavilion Park or stop by the Fall Harvest Festival this weekend. You're supporting a world-class park system in your own backyard. All right, with that, we'll open it up to journalists. We have one in studio, I think 9 on the line. So we'll start with Carolina.
You have been making quite a few big trips around the country, sharing your vision for the future, specifically for Democrats. Do you believe that message is being well received, and what specifically is resonating?
I've been traveling the country sharing my vision, not just for the Democratic Party, but how I think we can get beyond this constant us versus them, this division, which I think really threatens our country. You know, I remember saying the pledge every morning in school, and one of the things we pledged to this country to do was to keep it indivisible. And so when I take these trips, I talk both about the idea that we need to focus 80% of our time on things that matter to 100% of the American people, to make those issues not bipartisan, but nonpartisan. And those are people's jobs and whether they can afford to raise their family. It's their next doctor's appointment for themselves, their parents, or their kids. It's the roads and bridges they drive, the school they drop their kids off at, and whether they feel safe in their communities. And that's being well received by every crowd. Why? Because everyone's worried about those things and everyone wants to see a more functional government. The other thing I talk about that I think people feel too is we can't let the American dream slip away. Now, right now, people are worried that if they play by the rules and work hard, they still won't get ahead, that they still can't afford a house in the same decade that their parents did, that they still have to worry about that next medical bill that's going to come in the mail. And one of the things that's made this country so great is the belief that you can make it, that you can build that better life and give your kids more opportunity than you've had. And so I think it's really important for Democrats, Republicans, independents to work together to recognize how important both those nonpartisan issues and concerns of Americans are. And also, if we want to keep our greatness, if we want to keep being the best country in the world to be born in, we've got to make sure there's real opportunity that people can achieve. Karen Czar, WUKY.
Thank you, Governor. Earlier this week, Attorney General Coleman asked for you to set a date for the execution of Ralph Bays. Where do you stand on that? And regarding the Pre-K for All initiative, do you have any indication that there could be a shift this next upcoming legislative session to make that happen? Thank you.
We're going to have significant bipartisan support in the Pre-K for All program. Now, we'll see exactly how much there is at the start. We'll see probably some different ideas on how to achieve it. But we've already had, for instance, Republican House members and Republican senators say it's time for this to happen in Kentucky, and then engage in really constructive dialogue to talk about maybe different ways to do it or what should be involved in it. And so, you know, I've been heartened by the fact that even in these polarizing times, we've got people on both sides of the aisle that say, let's not get political about 4-year-olds. They can't register to vote, and they certainly don't vote. Let's just try to give them the very best start that we can. And on the other question, the Attorney General is pointing to part of a Franklin Circuit Court order and saying that I can sign a death certificate, a writ of execution. But another part of that same order says that I can't. It says that there is a regulation left that has to work its way through the process and then has to be brought in front of the court. We moved quickly to get that regulation in the comment period. It's going through it right now. Now, after all of this, there is a second issue, and that's that Kentucky does not have the drugs to carry out an execution if one was to move forward, and the companies are saying right now that they will not provide them to us or to any other state. With all that said, I've lost someone, a close friend of mine, to murder, and I know this family is still hurting, and we're thinking about them, and we're certainly praying for them. Kylie Hill, WDKY.
Hey, Governor, in regards to Ronald Exantis, you said it wasn't the parole board that made the decision, it was a previous statute. Would your administration look into that statute and make changes to prevent something like this from happening again?
Yeah, we'd be willing to work with the state legislature on that. This case was complicated not just by this statute, but what Ronald Exantis was actually convicted of. A lot has been talked about the facts, which are heartbreaking, especially for that family. But it went in front of a jury, and he was convicted guilty but mentally ill. And the convictions ended up being on second-degree assault and one count of fourth-degree assault. So one of the challenges is what the jury came back with, because the way the statutes apply is they apply to what the conviction is and not necessarily what some of those actions were. But that's one of the reasons that the parole board, in looking at the underlying circumstances, said no when he came up for early parole. So I do think that this, especially given this situation, is something that we can and we should look into. I hear several legislators are saying the same thing. Josh Wood, Courier-Journal.
Governor Beshear, thanks so much for your time. I've got two things for you today, if that's all right. First, I want to see if you could speak a little bit about what changed the equation on your decision to potentially remove Robertson County Sheriff Terry Gray. And second, I want to see if you could comment on Todd County's Sheriff Tracy White, who recently pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor charge from an incident where he showed up at a Logan County man's home wearing gloves and threatened to, and I'll paraphrase, leave out the swearing, get him another way. Are you considering action in that case or any others?
I'm still learning more about that second situation. In the first situation, I've received news that the Robertson County Sheriff is resigning and is resigning today. The difference is he had another DUI. He was on his period of monitoring from the court. It was certainly the three together present a significant case for habitual drunkenness, which is mentioned within the statute and is defined under law. I think the first two, it would have been really challenging under the law as it's been interpreted throughout Kentucky's history, if a removal had later been challenged in the courts. But this will be the second sheriff that I've demanded a resignation from and received a resignation from. Okay, we have someone from the Kentucky Lantern. It's either Jamie or Liam.
It's Jamie,
maybe we don't.
Governor. Thank you.
Oh, it's Jamie. Sure.
No, can you hear me? Okay, good.
I
good.
can.
Okay, good. I wanted to ask you about the amicus brief you joined other Democratic governors and attorney generals in filing in Oregon having to do with National Guard deployment. I also wanted to ask you a question about the Exantis situation. It's a kind of a process question. And by the way, the jury found him not guilty, but mentally ill.
Right.
So my understanding is he was released. He was eligible for release because of the credits he had earned for good behavior. And, the other way that inmates can earn credits for going to school and activities and such. And that reduced the 20-year sentence to 10. And the supervised early release is an anti-recidivism thing that inmates are supervised for a few months before they go off any supervision, before they're just free. So if he was going to be released because of the credits he had earned that had reduced his sentence, in compliance with the law, happens all the time, why did the parole board even bother to vote since they knew they couldn't stop his release, why did they vote on September 30th unanimously against his release?
Well, that's that's a question I'll have to ask them. I think it's what was just pointed out is that there is a calculation on everyone's sentence and release under the law based on different credits, and then this statute. But they did hold that meeting. They did unanimously vote against it. The parole board did everything they could under the law and in their jobs to not let this individual out. We'll get you more information on that. I don't have any more on it. The first question was on joining an amicus brief supporting the Oregon action against the Trump administration to prevent National Guard from another state coming in to a sister state over the objection of their governor. Now, I think this should be pretty basic. This is something that I believe is unlawful. There is no insurrection. This Trump administration is claiming anywhere that they want to send folks that there are these massive insurrections in the United States. There simply aren't. It's one of the hallmarks of our country that we don't have military running around on our streets. You don't get off an airplane and see military standing there with a machine gun. This is not who we are. We don't militarize our communities. It's one of the tenets of our very founding. What Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth are doing are wrong. It is un-American, and every governor should be standing up against it. I mean, the idea that Greg Abbott is bragging about sending Texas National Guard to Illinois when they are not welcomed by their governor, my goodness. What do you think would happen if Illinois National Guard was going to Texas over Greg Abbott's objection? I mean, he tried to leave the Union. And this is just, I wish I could say it's silly, but it's scary and it's dangerous. And you don't just get to order the National Guard into some place because you think the crime is too high, or to pick a fight with a blue mayor or a blue governor. This is something that no other president has ever done, and there's a reason. It's unlawful and it's wrong, and I'm going to do everything I can to stand up to it. Samantha Valentino, WKYT.
Thank you, Governor. I know you said you're willing to work with the legislature when it comes to re-examining the law that allowed for Ronald DeSantis to be released. Representative Nemes told us this week he plans to introduce Logan's Law, which in part would send somebody who's found not guilty by reason of insanity, as DeSantis was of that murder charge in that case, to a mental health facility. I'm curious your thoughts on that. And then also, if you've heard from the White House in any official capacity, as they did say they were looking into this case.
I've not heard from the White House in any official capacity, and for them to simply retweet that wrong information put the lives of our parole members, parole board members in jeopardy. You've got a huge following if you're the White House, and then to just simply push something like that out with no verification is irresponsible. And now there are some Kentuckians whose lives have been endangered, and you should hear some of these threats that are being made. They are awful. They're awful. They're not just threatening the parole board members, they're threatening their families. And some people who are making these threats are only doing it because they saw this information from the White House. So I hope in the future that those that have this amount of reach, that people look to for information, will be a whole lot more careful, because somebody could get hurt. What was the first part of the question? I think I answered it. Samantha, did I answer the first part of your question?
So sorry, I was still muted. The first part was, you mentioned you're willing to work with the legislature on re-examining the law that allowed him to be released. And Representative Nemes is looking at legislation that would send somebody found not guilty by reason of insanity to a mental health facility. I was just curious your thoughts on that as an option.
Yeah, I want to be open to any potential legislative ways to address this situation. So I want to talk to Representative Nemes or whoever else has one of these pieces of legislation, and to understand how it works. But I'm certainly open to different pieces of legislation that would hopefully prevent this from happening in the future. Gil McClanahan. Okay, Isaiah Kim Martinez.
Hey, Governor, sorry to hit you with another 2 questions here. But separate topics. First, Amy McGrath, of course, this week has announced her Senate campaign. Is that something you plan to get involved with? Do you support her? Any thoughts on that campaign? And then second, can you confirm whether Nissan has pulled out of a deal to manufacture parts at Blue Oval SK Kentucky 1?
I don't have any information to offer on the second question. On the first, I think we've got a lot of strong candidates in the Democratic primary for U.S. Senate. I don't plan to make an endorsement at this time. I think that the competition is going to make every single person that's in it stronger and better. And finally, Aaron Mudd, Herald Leader.
Thank you, Governor. I wanted to just ask a follow-up question about the National Governors Association. Are you considering leaving that group over the National Guard deployment to Illinois? And then I have a second question about potential plans from the Trump administration to cut funding for energy projects in Kentucky. Is that something that concerns you?
I'm incredibly disappointed in the National Governors Association. In the past, it has always stood up for the powers and the rights of governors. And right now, it's doing nothing as a president is trying to send National Guard into states over the objection of the governors and doing so unlawfully. If this organization is meant to stand up for governors, it needs to. And it can't simply be one that another governor can simply veto. And I'm also really disappointed in my fellow Republican governors that know how wrong this is. Remember, Tennessee sent its National Guard to Washington, D.C. before they ever thought sending them to Memphis. I mean, these are political stunts. They put our Guard, which are our neighbors, our friends, they're welders and CPAs, into jobs that they are not trained to do. And what's going on right now with the president ordering Guard to places that they haven't been asked to come is a threat to our governance. And remember, we are 50 states with our own governments, and that we are primarily in charge of both investigating and prosecuting crimes within our state. On the energy projects, I've seen the document that other people are referencing, but we haven't gotten any official word. I'd be very disappointed if this is going to move forward because Ascend Elements is an enormous project in Hopkinsville. If I were in a room, I'd remind the president and the administration that that county voted overwhelmingly for the president. He's about to cut a ton of jobs there if this is accurate. You look at the one in Maysville, they're changing the product that they make. They are reshoring something that is not currently made in the United States, which the Trump administration, or not made enough in the United States, which the Trump administration says it wants. If it cuts this funding, it's going to kill that project. And remember, if you sign a grant agreement with a company with tens of millions of dollars or more, they're relying on that. You trying to back out of your word, your contract, and your agreement midstream isn't right and has been relied upon. All right, and finally, Gil McClanahan is back on. We'll give him the last question. And we'll take that question through email. Thank you all. There is no Team Kentucky next week, so we'll be back in 2 weeks at our normal time of 12:30, hopefully with a lot of announcements of new jobs. Certainly, we've got some really good meetings coming up in Europe. Thank you all.